morning.
How are you today?
Very good indeed. It's very nice to bring that back. A million years ago, I was a geography student, so tin trays come from Sheffield and coffee from Brazil, that's what I know.
Yeah.
Then...
So a good 4 years well spent.
Yes, exactly, all in one sentence. Nothing if not compact. I did then work for quite a long time, actually, as a lavatory attendant or a toilet attendant in a factory. I just remember I had 2 blocks of facilities with 250 blokes going into one and 200 into another, and my job was to keep it clean. And I think if you spend a bit of time doing something like that, it certainly gives you a drive to do something else in life. My father had quite a big association with advertising at one stage in his life. He wisely clammed up when I started making noises about it and said, go and find it out for yourself, because the world will have changed from the world I knew. Long story short, secured a job as in account management for an agency called McCormick's, but at that stage we're in the process of being bought out by Publicis years ago, and was an account man for 2.5 years, and quite rapidly came to the conclusion, I think probably erroneously, but I felt it at the time, that as an account man, if things were going well, someone else took the credit, and if things went badly, you copped the blame. So I was sort of on the wrong end of an awful lot of ire and invective, and thought the people who seem to be having the most fun are in the creative department. In another part of my life, and still to this day play drums for various different musical outfits, and was playing in the agency band, and the creative director at the time was a guy called Jerry Moira, who's still a mate of mine and is an amazing man. And he was the singer in the band and I was the drummer. And so I carted him out for a drink and said, I'd like to be in the creative department. A week later I met him in the Zanzibar, which was the kind of go-to watering hole of the ad biz at the time. And he said, I've got bad news and good news for you. And I said, okay, what's the bad news? And he said, the bad news is you're fired, but the good news is you can work out your notice in the creative department. I left on Christmas Eve 1985, and on January the 4th, 1986, John Hegarty gave me a job. So as a copywriter, and then we went as a creative team there, and from that point on I've worked on the creative side of advertising. Titles, I think actually officially, if truth be told, on my as it were working passport it says creative director, but it currently says creative partner. And I get a little tired with LinkedIn every time you change something, immediately 500 people you never met congratulate you on your job change. Yeah. So I haven't bothered to update it. I think one can get very hung up on that. Our American friends are very good at giving lots and lots of layers to the hierarchy of management. My view is you're either a creative manager or a creative producer. Sometimes you get a little mixture of both, a hybrid sort of actor-manager thing, and after that you can call yourself anything you want. Yeah. But that's pretty much it. If you look up some dictionary definitions, which is something I did, creative partner was a title that was bestowed on me by a guy called Malcolm Poynton, who brought in 5 fairly substantial, I'm not talking about myself but the others, creative directors to run these very, very big accounts that Ogilvy's recognised as managing in a very astute way. The day-to-day job was actually directing the creative messaging of those accounts. When it came to being acting managing director, and I did say as I sort of took on the job publicly, if anyone sees me acting like a managing director, can you explain what that looks like? But the dictionary definition, if you look it up, a managing director is you are there to protect revenue and drive the finances. I'm not instinctively a financial head, and so I sat with a brilliant guy called James Barnes-Austin. He was the finance director and he's now the overall group finance officer. And he guided me through that period, and it was quite tough. Unfortunately, we had to make quite a few redundancies, but I think that which does not kill you makes you stronger. I learned a very great deal about the real workings of the business in a couple of years. It's been said, actually, by Nigel Bogle that clients now want a kind of Mick Jagger in the room with them, and I'm a very, very long way from Mick Jagger. But you've got to be...
a drummer?
I'm a drummer, but so yeah.
I thought the drummers were supposed to be the crazy ones in the band.
Possibly a little bit of Charlie. I think Charlie goes home and has cocoa every night. The expectation is that you will be a kind of rock star in the boardroom who can imagine and tell the stories around whatever the stories that you're going to tell to your public or your audience, and that you are attuned to every possible nuance, interest, excitement, invention, happening, movie, cultural, etc., etc. But they also want you to have an MBA in business.
Right.
So you've got to be able to manage your own team, you've got to be looking at the finances, how you're managing a project, how much does it cost to produce a creative idea. And it's just it's a question of being able to multitask these days. It's not the priority, it probably doesn't say that on my job description, but in my day-to-day dealings you do have to be aware of the finances. I think you try and allow your personality to breathe its own oxygen within the structure of a company. If you become totally dominated by that, you lose your spark, you lose your ability to connect, you lose your ability to come up with an idea. You have to be your own person.
Yeah.
Because the hope is you provide very clear conditions and circumstances, effectively a sandpit in which your creative teams can mess about. And most of my job is disappointment management to a degree, because you fairly frequently go in and kick the sandcastle down. If they fail to come up with anything, you've got to build it for them in front of their very eyes.
Yeah.
And you're the backstop. You can't produce a blank saying, sorry, it doesn't work. There are those that do who can't teach or judge or direct. And then there are those who direct and teach and coach. And actually, in my experience, that's probably the more important quality when bringing on creative people. They know how to explain why something is good or why it's not.
Yeah.
And Hegarty is an absolute case in point. His ability to kind of tear something to shreds before your very eyes and still give you a very strong sense of what you need to go and do is remarkable. Providing the oil between the sharp-toothed cogs of all the moving parts is very, very much, I think, what a creative director these days has to do. And those cogs are variously the client, the team, the broader team, as in the people who are managing the account and the business, the strategic guys. Quite often I might be working with creative teams in 4 different offices, Johannesburg, Chicago, Melbourne, and Shanghai, for the sake of example, which is a very live and real example in my life right now. But I think that there's something behind that, which is a more sort of fundamental question about creativity in the business right now, which is what do creative directors actually do? If you wandered around the business or the floor of any creative department in London or any other city for that matter, and asked people, and part of this exercise when you're interviewing might be to ask people exactly this question, what is an idea? It's strange how broad the responses are. Nobody can quite nail it. I think that's quite a healthy thing in a way, because it allows for variance and excitement. On the other hand, it is the most powerful weapon that we have, and that's the thing of greatest value that we can offer our clients. So you have to be able to come to some kind of definition. So when I'm sitting at my desk each day or talking to people or whatever I'm doing, my real job is I'm trying to rent space in people's brains. I'm in the mental rental business, if you like, and that's trying to lob an idea into the synapses of an audience, whoever they might be, and leave something with them for long enough to bring about a behaviour change or some purchase decision or just an attitudinal fix to bring about some sort of change in their lives. And that is the single most important thing I should be doing. And if I can't do that, then I shouldn't be doing it. I think in the sort of slightly hackneyed and therefore devalued language of marketing speak, creativity is a value-add component to a client's business. And what everybody wants in this day and age, pressured budgets, is disproportionate value from an idea. And the more efficient the idea, the better it will be, because they don't have to shout so loud, because it's clearly penetrating the brains of the audience they're talking to with considerable vigour and force. So you think, great. But actually, all too often the concentration in the agency process, in any communications agency, is on the conduit or the kind of rails on which this thing will travel, rather than what it is that is actually travelling on the rails. And it's not a perverse oversight. It's just as you can get very locked down into kind of, it's got to be digital, or it's got to be, I don't know, the answer to all your problems is a 30-second TV commercial. It's not. The answer to all your problems is a great idea.
Yeah.
I think there's a limited universe that gets it, and there's a sort of a tight band within the stockade who get the necessity to focus on the idea. But there's a lot of kind of friction and sort of swarf in the system where people are getting hung up on the avenues by which they reach people, and it's taking the debate away from what it should be about, which is how good is the idea. And yet you could sort of turn around and point to, well, what about CAN? What about D&AD? What about the Clios? What about the Andes? What about Creative Circle? Yes, they're great schemes to recognise the value of an idea, but sometimes they over-buff it too, so that there's a suspicion in the client community that the creative community are rewarding themselves just for getting out of bed in the morning. So I think it's trying to match and marry business imperative with creative power and put those two in the same place, which may well be what Creativepool's agenda is all about. It is very big, it is very structured, there are many compartments to it, and it manages to carry off a sort of simultaneous oxymoronic feat, and the structure is there to be used, it just takes a little time to get used to it. You know, and your palette or your universe is not just the UK and London, it's very, very much the world. And so you need structure. If you're dealing in every time zone in the world at any one time, you need all the help you can get. I can say, when I looked after Dove, the soap brand, for 2.5 years, you know, there were days when you would have to be in contact with both Tokyo and LA within 24-hour cycles. Sometimes sort of sitting on your bed at home at 3 o'clock in the morning with a conference call, thinking, I'm not sure this is really how I want to spend my time. There are moments of frustration, it has to be said. Pitching is a sort of a dark art and a simple one at the same time. It's a little bit like the dark net, really, I think. But what appears quite often to be the single exam question that needs answering in a brief or in a pitch process is not necessarily always what the real issue is. But the two parallel processes you have to run, makes it sound terribly contrived this, because they're a very organic thing, pitches, really. You know, number one is making sure you understand your client, and to be perfectly honest, if you don't understand them, all else falls apart. So, you know, what wins pitches is hearing what they're really asking for and providing a combination of what they need and what they want. The second one is making sure that your answers are agile, quick, and well developed enough to hit the mark. However much you think it's great, there will be greater ideas out there. There is always more than one way to skin a cat. You sort of have to make your work to a finished degree in order to be able to make your work to a finished degree. So, you know, Shutterstock and Google Images and Getty are increasing the kind of, you put it all in, put it together, try and give it a freshness in terms of just the visual quality of what you're presenting. But then you caveat it heavily with, were we to shoot this the very way that we shoot this, and we capture the performances or the language or the characters that we're talking about, will give you that significant edge. So, you know, what you're seeing is not what we would propose that you get. And that's probably the most difficult bit of negotiation right now with clients, is that they wish to buy what they see and say thank you very much, and it's become a kind of transactional thing. I mean, you just look at the, you know, top 10 on YouTube today. Why are the top 3 what they are? It's very difficult to pin it down, but it's because there's a sort of, it got there by happenstance. It's not quite how it should be. It isn't, you know, the path to mediocrity is paved with the good decisions of a committee-based process. It's there's something odd about it.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, to the purposes of the idea they're trying to rent space in people's brains, oddity wins. Relevant oddity.
Yeah.
So as far as creativity is concerned, you just feed the mind from everywhere. The person that just stares at their computer all day long at a desk is dead from the neck up and neck down, I'd say. It's actually feeding yourself with everything around you. So you might not be able to teach it, but there are certain inspirational people who work within the education system, and you see the great colleges from where good students come. And it's something to do with the people there. They've created this wonderful kind of playpen in which people feel free to express themselves risk-free, inventively, with sharp edges to it, and also that where people are able to fail. One of the great necessities in a creative culture is an ability to fail, because if you don't fail, you'll never win. If you give people clear reasons why something is good and clear reasons why something is bad, then it's much more straightforward. And I've been lucky enough to learn at the feet of some very, very good people who were very good explaining why something was wrong.
Yeah.
And sometimes, creativity is reduced to a lexicon of that's good, that's shit. I know a lot of people who use those sort of terms, myself included sometimes. But actually, it's bad because is a much, much better way to go.
Yeah.
And it's just being able to explain that, and then give somebody something back, give them the embryonic kind of centre post around which you can fashion your next clay pot, and they can build on top of that. That's what really is the real skill. That's what marks our great creative director. Again, I'd have to say John Hegarty. I know he's cited incessantly, but I learnt so much from him because he always gives something back. But he also say, just don't like it. Let's go straight and say that's wrong. If something's not going to work or it's not going to run or it's just not very good, kill it.
Tell them.
Yeah.